know this is a challenging time for everybody, but I hope that your participation today will provide a bit of a diversion and also provide you with some valuable information that you can use in your work. So I do want to welcome you again to the Using Video to Translate and Promote Research, an Introduction to Video Production webinar that is being offered to you by the Model Systems Knowledge Translation Center, MSKTC. It is the first of a three-part series of webinars that we have put together to provide you with guidance and information on how you can use video in your work to translate your research so that it is most usable by consumers, practitioners, and other stakeholders. This webinar and the other two subsequent webinars will be based in part on the Model Systems Researcher's Guide to Video Production, which you will find on the msktc.org website. So we hope you will check that out after the series. So next slide, please. So I am Ruth Sugar. I'm a technical assistant consultant here at American Institutes for Research. I work in our adult learning division, and I also work on our disability work, specifically the MSKTC project. And it is my pleasure at this time to introduce you to Dr. Paul Giguere. He's the Senior Director of our Technology Solutions Division at AIR. Next slide, please. So Paul is the lead presenter for today's webinar and for the other two webinars. So Paul leads the work at AIR, specifically in the research and application of best practices with learning technology, using it particularly with video and audio and multimedia, distance learning, and also with online platforms and tools. So the work that Paul leads is focused primarily with our professional development work, technical assistance work, adult learning, and various training. So he has a lot of expertise to share with you today. We hope that you will ask questions of him. He has a lot to share, and that also you'll join us for the future webinars as well. So at this time, I will turn it over to Paul.
Great, thank you, Ruth. I think the first thing we could do is just cover a little bit of our agenda for today and what we're going to talk about. First off, we're going to look at some of the general uses for video, particularly how they apply for you and your research translation practices. We'll also identify different types of video and talk a little bit more about that, and maybe even talk a little bit about the ones that are probably going to be most relevant for you as well. We're also going to talk about the stages of video production, and we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, and I'll explain that when we get to that particular slide. But right now we're just covering the production level, introductory production level for this. And we're also going to look at the planning process, which, as you might already know, if you have any experience with video production, is essential to having a successful video product. And right now I'm going to turn it back to Deirdre to help us get a poll started. And basically we're looking at how do we move research to practice and from the laboratory, research journal, academic conference into the hands of people or organizations who can actually use it and put it into practical use. So the first poll question that we have for today is going to be, what do you think is most important? And you can select different options that will be available to you. Now I'm in a presenter mode, so I'm going to rely on Deirdre to help talk me through this because I don't actually see the polls on my screen because I'm in presenter mode.
Sure thing, Paul. This is Deirdre. So we've got that poll up now, and folks should be able to choose their selection for which they think is most important if they'd like to vote on that. There's several options here. And just so everyone knows, if you're not seeing the poll, that could be if you are using Zoom in a browser versus having downloaded the poll. That's one caveat. So if you haven't downloaded Zoom, you may not be able to participate in the poll, unfortunately. Paul, do you want me to read out what the options?
Sure.
Because maybe if folks aren't seeing the poll, they could even type in the chat what they think might be important.
Sure.
So again, we're asking, which do you think is the most important? One option is researchers talking about their findings and the intended or actual impacts, testimonials from consumers about their rehabilitation needs and experiences, interviews with clinicians about the interventions that are proving effective, panel discussions by policymakers who are using research to make decisions, references to peer-reviewed publications from the research, an overall narrative or story focusing on one or several patients, or other, which we've asked folks to note in the chat if there's something else that you think is important.
And for those who can't see the poll, again, it's researchers talking about their findings, testimonials from consumers, interviews with clinicians, panel discussions, or references to peer-reviewed publications, or even an overall narrative or story. Great. I can see people putting them into the chat now.
So I'm going to go ahead and close the actual poll because I'm thinking maybe people didn't have a chance to download the Zoom app.
Okay, great. Moving on, what I want to do is just provide a little bit of some statistics around video and the proliferation of video. So these numbers are actually from the Pew Research Center and Oblero, which is a company that does YouTube statistical analysis. And currently there are about 2 billion active users using video. This is based on YouTube. So there are other video platforms, but YouTube obviously is one of the largest. Video reaches, it's estimated, reaches about 90% of all 18 to 49-year-olds in the United States. There are 8 billion videos viewed each day worldwide, and 500 hours are uploaded every single minute. I'm willing to bet that there's probably a little bit more video usage going on right now based on what's happening around the world. 79% of users have, internet users have accounts on YouTube, for instance, and you can see the other numbers. 72% of millennials and 43% of baby boomers and 58% of Gen X people have access to and use YouTube video. And I only highlight YouTube and these stats just to give you an idea about how far-reaching video is in our society today globally. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some general uses of video. There may be many more, but these are ones that would tend to kind of resonate the most with us. And the first one's promotion. So it's promoting the work of your institution, your organization, the model system, things of that nature. So it's really more of a promotional kind of video product. The other would be product-based demonstration. So you could show, develop a video that shows how to use a particular assistive technology, for instance, or how to use exercise equipment. So it's really a demonstration. Another approach would be training, and this is more of an instructional approach. So how do you do certain things? Sharing information, using video to help people learn skills and problem solve. And then research. So you may use video to conduct research, do observations, do interviews, that sort of thing. And then you can also use video to push the results of research out to people as well. Sometimes that video would also include other factors, not just people talking, but rather charts and graphs and animations and things like that. We've talked about general uses for video. Let's talk a little bit about types of video. Panel discussions are one type. So you get a group of people together on on video, and you have a panel discussion, usually a facilitated one. So you got somebody talking people through. This could happen in a conference room, could happen at a conference, or any other kind of venue. Then there are individual interviews. We sometimes call them narrated interviews because they're interviews with people around particular topics, but there's usually a narrator, either person you hear or someone who's actually asking the questions, kind of walking you through that process and walking the interviewees through a series of questions that they respond to. That result then gets edited in a certain way that actually uses a combination of the presenter or facilitator along with the interviewees telling their story or talking about their experience. You most likely have seen this kind of approach when you've looked at something like a PBS documentary or something like that, where you are watching a group of people being interviewed and there's a narrator who's kind of setting the context as you go. Another kind is documentaries. This could be, these can all be telling stories, but the documentary is mostly about telling a story. It's showing something, and it's got a focus to it. The other kinds of types demonstrations, which we had on the general uses of video. Many of you are probably familiar with TED Talks, which are usually 10-minute fast presentations, usually by one individual, talking about a concept or an innovation or something that they simply have to say, and they can use a venue like that to do that. TED Talks also typically have an audience that's physically present, although they don't have to be. Then there are interactive videos. Now, YouTube and Vimeo and other platforms don't offer interactive video capabilities, but there are opportunities for, depending on your project and what you're trying to do, to create a video that allows people to interact with it. And by that I mean they're able to, the video will stop and maybe ask them a question. And based on their question, their response to the question, it can branch them to another part of the video that's relevant to how they responded. So that's a kind of interactive video, and that's what I mean by that. And then there's live video streaming. So you might see this sometimes if you're attending a conference virtually and there's a plenary presenter in a large conference hall and it's being broadcast live, and you can watch it through the internet. Google tools and things like that have those ability to do that. Facebook can broadcast live and that sort of thing, as well as all the webinar platforms, including the one we're using today, Zoom. So we're going to do another poll, and I'm sorry for those who haven't downloaded the application, the Zoom app, but I will talk through the results. And it's also being put into the Zoom webinar chat. So which of the following types of video have you or your organization produced in the past? And you can type your response in chat if you only have access to chat, or you can actually make your selection from the pop-up poll. And I'll just give a couple minutes, a minute for that, and see how fast and quickly people can do it. And Deirdre, what I'll do is I'm going to ask you to just kind of report out on the top 3 or 4 that came out of the poll itself.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, from the chat anyway, a lot of panel discussions, interviews, panel interviews, narrative interviews, individual interviews, and live videos through Zoom. That's great. All right, I think everyone's had a chance to vote, whether in the chat or in the poll. Deirdre, what came out as the top 3 in the poll?
Not seeing any votes here, so I think most people are using the chat.
Okay. So, I mean, based on the chat responses, it seems like the panel discussions, individual interviews, narrative interviews, some streaming, some webinars, things like that. So kind of a little bit across the board, which is great. What I'd like to do now is actually show you some short clips, a couple of examples of videos that have been done that actually are on the MSKTC website. So the URL is at the bottom of my screen, my slide. And you can go view all the videos that are there, but I went and kind of picked a few that I thought are kind of representative of the types of videos most of you actually listed in the chat box. So I'm going to switch over right now to that. All right. So let's take a listen to the first one. And this is called Relationships After Traumatic Brain Injury. And I want to make sure I got the volume is up.
At 50 miles per hour.
It was very severe. The people in the EMS said that I had a 1% chance of making it back.
The doctors at MCV Hospital in Richmond, Virginia did everything they could to save Hugh, including removing part of his skull to make room for the brain to swell. For Rosemary, it was one shock after another.
And then he wakes up from the coma and he looks so different, not at all like himself. He can't really speak. It's just frightening.
Rosemary and Hugh faced months of physical rehabilitation and occupational therapy for Hugh's traumatic brain injury, or TBI. It was a long, hard slog, but it was really only half the battle.
That video. Again, you can watch the whole thing. It's an 11-minute video. We're only looking at little pieces of it. And I'll switch to another example, which is exercise and fitness after spinal cord injury. This video is unique in the collection of videos in that it uses audio description. So you're going to get a sense of what that means in 2 seconds when I run the clip for you.
Harrington, MD.
After spinal cord injury, you have increased risk for multiple medical problems. Obesity, cardiovascular disease, increased risk for diabetes. And so exercise is extremely important after spinal cord injury.
Dr. Amanda Harrington is the medical director of the University of Pittsburgh Model Center on Spinal Cord Injury.
Exercise is also beneficial because it helps to get people back to life. It helps them engage in social interactions, whether they're exercising individually at the gym or in a group setting.
All right.
These are messages that Lee and his friend...
example. And this one is exercise after burn injury. So play this. And this one I had queued up, but I'm going to move ahead to... Sorry about that. It reset.
Pain. So if I'm stretching your ankle and you have pain in your ankle because I'm stretching it, that's expected pain. And not that we don't pay attention to it. It's not that we ignore it, but it's expected. So we'll continue the stretch because we know the benefits of that stretch. So if you're doing an exercise and you have some of that expected pain, if you're doing lots of squats and your hips are getting sore or your quads are getting tired, that's normal pain. But if you're exercising and you suddenly have chest pain or, a really significant headache, if you have a new pain in general and you can't explain it,
all right,
that would be a reason to stop activity.
I'm going to jump back to the slides. All right, so let's move ahead. And we're going to use the chat for this particular thing. What was particularly effective in the video clips? Let's do one question at a time. So in the chat box, if you could write in, what do you think was particularly effective in just the clips we saw, the little bits? Good use of B-roll, hearing from survivors and caregivers and professionals. Personal stories. Great. Yeah, I agree with all of those responses. It's a great use of storytelling. It uses the consumer or the patient in some cases is the term, and it uses narration very effectively. So you've got a narrator framing and putting everything in context, and then you've got people who are actually interviewed responding to questions. You don't hear the questions, you just see their responses, but professionals and consumers are involved in that. And then they also use B-roll. I'll explain B-roll a little later, but yeah, there's a good use of B-roll and other imagery and photos and other kinds of media that are intermixed. So it's not just simply talking heads. If it was, it wouldn't have been so interesting to watch those clips. So yeah, and the audio descriptions didn't kick in. I had to check. I will check on that. It's supposed to kick in. It may be that there wasn't a lot of audio descriptive pieces in the clip I made, but audio description means that anything that happens on screen that's not spoken is described by another person. So you can hear somebody actually talking through the what's happening on screen. So if somebody drops a piece of paper, you hear someone say drops paper or paper drops or something of that nature. So that's audio description, which is different than closed captions. Closed captions are basically just reporting on everything that's being said. So anyway, that's the difference. So the next question is, what story would you want to tell using video? And that might involve a little bit more thought, but use the chat box and let us know. I'm curious to hear what kinds of stories you're interested in telling using video. Demonstrations. Train on policy and procedures, training video, yep. Benefits that research participants have experienced. All right. Show new technologies, providing public information on drug safety. These are all great, and they're all viable stories, and thinking through how you tell the story is what we're going to cover a little bit later in this webinar. Testimonials, information, short videos. Great. Thank you. These are really, it's really a great list. What I'd like to do now is talk about some key questions that you really want to consider. And these are important things you want to ask yourself, particularly before you maybe even decide you want to do a video, is really to kind of suss out what your objectives are and what you're trying to get to with the video. So we'll talk a little bit about the why. So what's the main objective? What ideas need to be included in the video? What do you need to be able to make a part of the video? And actually, does it all hang together? Are all the ideas interconnected? Do they form a whole? And also, what takeaways do you want viewers to remember? What do you want them to learn from the video or take away from the video or do something? Is there a call to action as a result of the video? Does your video fit into a larger strategy? In other words, if you are trying to do some sort of campaign that might involve print-based materials or other kinds of activities and resources that you're pulling together, does the video fit into that strategy? Is it part of that larger approach that you're trying to do? The who part. So it's very important, but who is the audience? Who's the intended audience? If it's researchers, you're going to design your video a little bit differently. But if it's consumers or patients, you're going to design it differently for them. So you want to make sure you're very clear on who the audience is for it. And if it's both or multiple audiences for the same video, you probably want to make sure that you're addressing each audience both individually, but that it interconnects with the other pieces and the other audiences as well. So who should appear in the video? Is it researchers, professionals? Is it consumers or patients? That's something you want to think about beforehand. And what content do you want to share in the video? And also, you want to ensure that all the speakers both are knowledgeable, maybe even charismatic. By that I also mean that they're comfortable doing it. Not a lot of people are comfortable being on video. Not a lot of people are comfortable being on a webinar with their video on. So you want to make sure people are actually not only knowledgeable, but also comfortable doing it. And then the how. Do you have specifications on which footage or visuals should be in there? You know, do you want interviews? Do you need a voiceover narrator? Do you have any graphics, photos, any kind of media that you want to make sure gets included in the video? A poster, the cover of a book, things of that nature. And also you want to think about the ideal video length for what you're trying to accomplish. I will tell you that most of the videos we do at AIR are probably around 5 to 10 minutes in length. But you know, if you're doing a documentary, you may have to go much longer than that. If you're trying to do something that's more of a promotional video, it's probably going to be a lot shorter than that, maybe even 30 seconds, which is the standard length of an average television commercial. Also, you want to know what your deadline is. You know, when do you need to get this video completed? Is there any other mitigating circumstances that require the video be completed by a certain date? And if so, you want to make sure that you've allowed for that. And then what is your budget? It's kind of a question that probably should be at the very top of everyone's list, but you know, how much do you have to spend to actually create the video? We encounter all kinds of budgets, small and large, and the budget in some ways does dictate the nature of the video, how complex it might be, and sometimes even the length of the video too. So it's something you want to keep in mind. Now, when we started the webinar, we were talking about one of our agenda items was to talk about the stages of video production. And what we're going to talk about today is actually the pre-production and information about the shoot. So we're covering 2 stages really in this webinar. In the second webinar, we're going to cover the video producer or the video production. And the reason why we're doing it second rather than first is because usually by the time you get to a video producer, you've already thought through a lot of those questions I had on the prior slides, and you're ready and prepared not just to talk with the video producer or video production company, but you're also ready to perhaps engage them going forward if you think they're right for you. And then the third webinar is going to focus on post-production, which is just as important of a stage. We have some questions that are being asked. I think I want to just go into the chat box very quickly. And I see, Ruth, you've been responding, which is great. Okay. Again, you can also use the Q&A box to ask any questions, but the chat will work just as well. And I'm just going to, whoops. All right. Any other questions coming in? All right. So let's talk a little bit about pre-production. There's a lot of information here. I think a prior question asked, is this going to be available, you know, later in an archive? Yes, the recording will be available and the materials and things like that. So you can always go back to these questions. But you know, first up is what is your vision? You want to decide on what the key messages are and what the goals are for the video. It's very important. It's part of that pre-planning process. Also, you want to clarify the roles of the people who are going to be involved. Clearly, you're going to have what video producers would call the talent, which are the people that are going to be on camera or narrating. But you also want to think about who else you're going to need on your team in order to do the video work. And there's a wide range of roles. And also you want to know what role you're going to play in this. Are you going to be the manager producing everything? Are you going to be directing it? Are you going to be involved in the technical aspects? Or are you really hiring someone and you're looking to them to do and play most of those roles for you and find the right people to fulfill the team? Will the video communicate content through a script? Is it going to be all scripted, literally word by word, or are you going to use interview questions and work with interviewees? You know, it's important to know that. Usually the narrator part of what we saw in those prior examples are scripted. The interview questions are developed in advance, and then and sometimes they're shared with the interviewee. Sometimes they're not. You want to get kind of that more instant feedback response. You also want to identify all of the participants, who's going to deliver the content, you know, who's going to do the voiceover, who's going to be the interviewer, who's going to be the interviewee, who will write the blocking script, and we're going to look at an example of that, and also the shooting schedule. These are two planning tools that you have access to in the MSKTC video guide, which we will point you to later, but it allows you to really break down what is the video going to be like, how's it going to flow, how long is it going to be, how long will each segment be, as well as the shooting schedule. Where are you going to shoot the video, how are you going to shoot it, what kinds of things are going to be needed during the shoot. Who will direct the video, including the participants, but also the crew. So you're going to have a crew of people doing the video themselves. The videographers, there might be more than one. You're going to need an audio person. You're going to need lighting, makeup, wardrobe. I mean, there's a lot of people involved. And who's going to be directing all of that? So it's one of those pre-production questions. And will you need B-roll footage? Now, B-roll, and many of you might already know the term, but it's video footage that is kind of like cutaway footage. So you see someone being interviewed and they're talking about the importance of exercise. And so while they're talking in their response to maybe a question, you see the video cut away to some other video of people exercising. That is called B-roll, and it's really meant to break the video up in a way so that it's not just a talking head or talking heads, but rather you're seeing other examples that are illustrative of what's actually being discussed or talked about. So that's called B-roll, and B-roll is something that can be shot as a part of the product that you're creating, or just as you can license stock photography, you can also license B-roll video. So it'll depend on your needs and what you're hoping to accomplish. And also, what are the technical requirements for the video? Where's it going to be hosted? And that's going to dictate what kind of frame rate it's going to be shot at. Is it high definition? Most of us don't need 4K video, but is it going to be 4K? Are you going to need captioning? Most likely you will. So you'll need closed captioning. You may need descriptive captioning as well. Will the captions need to be done in other languages other than English? So these are all questions that are part of the pre-production thinking. The blocking script, it's, and again, this is actually available as a part of the MSKTC video guide. It's found online, and essentially it's in the form of a Word document, but we use this blocking script approach to actually really lay out exactly what the video is going to do. And so you can see at number 1, we have 5 seconds. It's going to be text on a screen, so there'll be some sort of titling that's going to happen. And the scene title is called intro, and it's going to fade in with video title and B-roll of a classroom in the background with background music playing. So you get the idea. There's some classroom stuff going on on the video. Titling comes up, and there's some music being played. That's a 5-second piece. No narrator, no script at that point. But we go to the next piece, and so we fade out to a 1-minute mark where the scene title is called What is MSKTC? And you can see that this incorporates B-roll and a visual on the screen. We start with the B-roll video, and then we voice over and transition to on-screen graphics with voiceover describing what MSKTC is. So you can see that there's a narrator. We haven't determined who the narrator is yet. And then there's going to be a script. MSKTC is, and it's literally what the person's going to read who's narrating at this point. And you can see this continues. It's an ongoing process. A 5-minute video, for instance, could have probably a couple dozen rows with all this information necessary, because it has a lot of transitions, and it's looking at a lot of people and talking to a lot of people, but you're literally breaking this down. Now, other people might say, well, I've heard of storyboards. A storyboard is a visual that allows you to plan a video. This is kind of like a storyboard, but in a storyboard, and in everyone's mind, a storyboard is actually something that's drawn. So the scenes are all drawn out. They're illustrated. We usually don't do that in the work we do for these kinds of videos, because it's not necessary from a stylistic standpoint to show visually something that we hope to accomplish. In other words, we already kind of know this person's going to be in an office. We're going to have 2 cameras on them, so 2 angles that we can go back and forth between. The background's going to be basic, so you don't need to draw that out and create a full-blown storyboard. If you were creating the next Star Wars movie, you'd want a storyboard, because the visual aspects of each scene need to be communicated to the people who are going to be building props, backgrounds, etc., costumes. But in this case, you don't really need that. So that's the difference, and a blocking script is a very effective tool to use. What I like to do is stop here and see if there are any questions. Now, you can use the Q&A box if you have that available to you, or you can use the chat box. But I'm going to also ask Ruth if there are any questions that you want to put forward to me, or people have already posted in the chat box.
I am not seeing questions in the chat related to what you were just speaking about, but I hope people will also use the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your screen with the 2 speaking bubbles, the 2 speech bubbles. You can use that and type in your answer into the screen that pops up, or your question or answer. But I will also look at the chat.
So one of my colleagues is asking how many people may have used a blocking script in the past, and if you did, was it helpful? So is anyone and you might have called it something different. You may not have called it a blocking script. It could have been something else. You could also raise your hands if you want to just indicate that you've used a blocking script or some similar tool in the past to kind of plan your video out.
So Paul, do you want me to read you some of the questions and comments? Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, so Emily said that she has done something similar but on a smaller scale, so maybe she could describe that a little bit in the chat for us, or we could take her off mute. Deirdre could take her off mute if Emily would like to speak her response. We do have a question from Maynard, who is asking if you could talk about the requirements for accessibility based on funding regarding the Rehab Act and the ADA.
Sure. Why don't I respond to that question?
Okay.
With most video that's produced using federal funds, but it should be for, in my opinion, any video that's produced, the requirements really are that you provide closed captioning and also descriptive captioning if it's necessary. Sometimes the videos don't require descriptive captioning because of what's being shown on the video. But descriptive captioning and closed captioning are both very important. Closed captions are actually relatively easy to do. They're done in post-production, and you can. There are actually a variety of services out there that can do closed captions for any kind of video that you've created. So and we actually have some in the guide, I believe, but one that we use is called rev.com, R-E-V, and you basically upload your video, you provide a link to your video, and usually in about 12 hours or less, they will create a caption file for your video. They use a combination of both human beings who do the captioning as well as robots who analyze the wording. It's probably about 85% accurate because sometimes your video might have some technical terms that are in there that the person who's translating and making the captions might not know. But you have the ability to go and edit the captions, review them, edit them however you like. It's a very easy thing to do. It's kind of like a little word processor that has a video at the top playing. And then when you're happy, you can download it. The file is called a SRT file, and that's a caption file that you can upload to YouTube, Vimeo, or wherever your video is hosted. And once you've done that, when people play the video, if they hit the little CC button in their browser, underneath the video, it'll turn on the captions, and that file will actually then show the text. So that's closed caption. Descriptive captioning is a little bit different because what you're doing is you're recording someone actually describing what happens on the screen as it happens, usually pretty quickly. They talk very fast so that they're not falling over the narrator or someone who's talking at the same time. And then that audio is actually integrated into the audio track for the video. And so, and usually people have an option. They can watch a one with audio descriptions or one without audio descriptions. So I hope that answered that question. The cost for doing audio descriptions is probably something that's part of the video production. So if you're working with a video producer and you need audio descriptions, they would hire someone to do that for you. And then you would wind up with two versions of the video, one with, one without. Both versions, though, will have captions. Ruth, yes.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to let you know that Emily did respond with some comments about her experience. So she said that they completed a video at the NRTC and used audio descriptions and closed captions. And they felt that the closed captions were also a simple process, but the AD ended up being way more work than expected. It was really tough to consider what needed descriptions and how to do them properly. And she asked if you have any advice on audio descriptions.
Yeah, you know, they are really hard to do. It's a decision-making process regarding what's happening on the video. So that's part of it. The other part of it is someone who can do them well, do the recordings well, literally. And then they need to be integrated into the video at certain time indexes of the video so that they work for what's happening in the video itself. When we've done audio descriptions, even if we've produced the video internally, it's our video, it's our folks who did the video work, we usually hire an outside firm to do the audio descriptions. It could be a video production company, for instance, and you just want them, that's the only thing you want them to do are the audio descriptions. We found that that's actually the most cost-effective and less headache in the long run because we get exactly what we want. Really good audio descriptions, professional quality audio recording, and a audio describer, you know, a secondary narrator who sounds really good and is able to move through the video very quickly and get the audio descriptions to sound nice. I don't have a particular, without plugging companies, I don't have a particular organization that I would recommend for audio descriptions, but perhaps, you know, if you just did some Googling, you might, for video production or video producers, you would find probably a local organization or company that does that. And then just open up a conversation with them. That's probably the easiest way to find someone. And it might be good to also work with someone who's local to you and like in physical close proximity because there may be more back and forth or video reviews that have to happen. And sometimes that's easier in person than it is at a distance.
Paul, we also had a comment from Maynard saying that accessibility requirements also apply to the PowerPoints and slides being used, text contrast and background color.
That's right. So anything you're showing on the screen, not just the video itself, but any materials or slides or book covers, you know, things of that nature. Anything that's shown on the screen, you want to make sure that it meets accessibility requirements. There are guidelines online at the ADA, and there's also a lot of other organizations that provide guidelines on what works and what doesn't regarding contrast and color selections and things like that. Because, you know, if someone has a visual impairment, they may have trouble actually discerning things that have like low contrast, or the opposite could be true too. It's too high of a contrast. So it's good to think about all of the things that go into the video. I think that's all. Are there any other questions? I think that's all for now.
Right, there are no more in the chat at the moment. Yeah.
So why don't we move on to the next phase, next stage, if you will, and that's the shoot. So all the planning, all the work you've done, it leads up to the shoot, and it's the actual physical shooting of the video. This is a lot of logistical work, and you have to be prepared to kind of coordinate this or have someone do it for you. But you want to send out all the details, the location, the schedule. If you're doing multiple interviews, you want to make sure they're scheduled properly so you have enough time to do each interview. Particularly if they're not in the same location, you need to move equipment. You need to plan for that moving of the equipment. If it requires travel, then you obviously have to make sure that there's enough time for people to travel, set up equipment, tear it down, move to another location, and so on. This process can take 30 to 60 minutes for each shoot. It depends on how much equipment is being used. It's not just putting a camera on and off of a tripod and then folding it up and taking it away. There's lighting, there's audio, there may be microphones and booms. There might be rigging for backgrounds and drops and things of that nature. So you want to make sure that there's enough time allocated to do all of that. You also want to know who's going to be present at the filming and the interview. You don't need every interviewee to be present for the entire day of shooting if they're only going to be filmed at 1 p.m. in the day, and it's only going to be about a half hour of filming for them. So you can kind of develop that approach and not have too many people on set at any one time. Also assign a point of contact for the filming crew. If you're working with other people who are going to be shooting the video for you and doing the audio work and the lighting, you want to make sure that there's a single point of contact for the filming crew so that they are all getting the same message at the same time from the right person. It's very important. We speak from experience. We've had people in our film crew would show up thinking that there's going to be some filming done at a particular location. It's actually in another location that day. And they got it from two different people who both thought they had the right answer. So you want to really coordinate. And also preparing the interviewees and the subjects in advance of the shoot. Not just message delivery and script, but also clothing and things like that. It's useful to have someone on set, at least at the beginning, to work with the interviewees and anyone who's going to be on camera who can do makeup or can do styling. And it's really a very useful thing to have. I initially, when I first started in the business, I thought it was unnecessary, and then I realized how important it really is to have someone who knows how to do that, how to take the shine off, how to mix the powder to take the shine off for different skin tonalities. Making sure that a hair that's come down is pulled back because there's continuity issues with that, particularly when you're doing multiple takes. So clothing, are they wearing the right clothes? Will the clothes work with the background? Jewelry, bangles, all those things can cause all kinds of problems and wreak havoc with the video shoot. In that case, jewelry making noise can be picked up by microphones that are usually inside lapels or blouses or jackets. So these are things to keep in mind. The shooting schedule. This is an example of a shooting schedule. Again, this is in the video guide as well, and you can see here it's essentially a spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet, but you can see that day one we have the time for setup. We have then time for the place we're going to be. We're going to be at the rehab center at 10:15. Setup is at 10. The first person we're going to have is Denise. That's going to be played by Lola. We have one wardrobe that we need to think about. It's casual with a sweater. Props are going to be keys. So these are all like the details of every single thing that has to happen for each part of the video. Now you can see that the scenes are not actually in order. And that's important to know too, because the actual scene that's going to come first in the video is actually further down the list. It's the reception desk with Denise. And she's going to be wearing casual pants and a blouse. All right, which means that when we eventually get to that point in the day, Denise is going to have a wardrobe change because she started off casual with a sweater. Now we're going to make sure that she doesn't have that sweater on, and she's also wearing pants and a blouse. And there may be continuity issues, so we want to pay attention to that. So all of these things are part of the shooting schedule. And you really need to pay a lot of attention to it because you want to make sure that you have the right people at the right time in the right place with the right clothing on, with the right props available, and it's just really a lot of minutia, really, but it's so important because it also makes the shoot actually go and flow much more smoothly. And again, the reason why things would be out of order in terms of the actual scenes that will appear in the video is that you may only have access to the rehab center in the morning. Later in the morning, you don't any longer, which means you have to shoot that right away. So scene 7 comes first in the shoot schedule, but then later on, the reception desk, they have no problem shooting that later in the morning. So that's why that first scene in the video is shot later. I hope that makes sense. It's actually a lot of work to pull this together, but it pays off in the long run because you have a much more flowing, smoothly running video shoot for a particular day or days. Talking a little bit more about this, I mentioned makeup artist, hairstylist on site. Also, when answering interview questions, participants should not endorse or promote any commercial products. No commercial logos should be in the background unless you're shooting at a hospital and it's something that's a part of what you're doing. And so it should be in the background or should be noticed, but you don't want to pay attention to these kinds of things. You don't want the proverbial, can of Coke sitting out on a desk somewhere. You want to make sure you've gotten rid of all of those things. Also, if you're working with a videographer, trust their skills and vision to get the best footage. A lot of videographers have a tremendous amount of experience, and they know what angles work, how to put the lighting, and where to put light. You may have thought that you were going to shoot at a conference room table, but then the videographer says, it would be much better if you shot at a desk because light is reflecting off the surface of the conference room table. It's causing some underlighting that's going to be a problem. So trust their skills, but also trust the vision because again, they're working off your blocking script that you may have actually collaborated with a videographer or video producer on. And so they're going to make sure that that blocking script is realized in doing this work. Maynard has a question. What about your organization logo? If you're creating a video for your organization and it's important that you have it, yes. What we're trying to talk about are, literally the Coke bottle on the desk. It's kind of promoting a commercial product. Things like that. Commercial logos. You don't want to have. We actually did a video at an airport. We created a whole bunch of video at an airport, but we had to be really careful about any background logos. So we actually filmed at a JetBlue terminal, but we couldn't show any JetBlue logos in the background. So we had to be very careful where we angled the cameras so that we weren't promoting JetBlue. So that's what we mean by that. Also, you want to make sure you collect release forms. Again, the guide has examples and you can adapt them to your own particular use, but everyone who appears in the video is being interviewed. You want to make sure that they are, you get a release form. Otherwise, legally, you're not really allowed to release the video unless they've agreed to let you. If somebody's being paid for their likeness or they're being paid for the interview, you want to make sure you have a contract with them so they understand that, by being paid, they don't own the video and they don't own the clips that they are in. So there's just some legal stuff. You want to make sure you're aware of that and you're taking care of it. Then we get to post-production, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in detail in other in the last webinar of our series. But there are several things you need to keep in mind regarding post-production. The editing, the review, all of the technical requirements that you need for your video, any logos, graphics, text. That gets to Maynard's question about your organizational logo. Make sure you have that logo available, that the video producer has it, or the video editor, the person doing the editing, has high quality logos, graphics that you want to have in the video that are going to be used. You have a review process, and then project organization. So let's go through each of these in greater detail. So the editing and review, the way this works is that a video editor basically creates a draft version of the video. It's an alpha version, we call it. It's a full sequence though. So you remember when we looked at the shooting script, we shot scene 7 first, but then we shot scene 1 down the road later in that morning. Well, it's the videographer's job to take all of those out of order sequences, essentially, and sequence them according to the blocking script and get them in that proper sequence. At the alpha stage, you may be missing titles, you may be missing the intro music, you might even be missing some B-roll because it hasn't been produced yet, licensed yet, that sort of thing. But the full sequence of the video is there, and they usually are like placeholders for missing titles or graphics or media that are going to be integrated later into a subsequent version. Also at that alpha version, usually no color or audio correction has been done yet. Color correction means adjusting the colors for the tonalities of the lighting situation in which the video was shot. It takes a lot of time actually to do color correction. It's scene by scene, clip by clip. And usually video editors don't want to do that for an alpha version. They want to wait first because you may say, oh, we don't like that clip, let's take that clip out. Well, if they spent time color correcting it, it's wasted time for them. Same is true with the audio. The raw audio may not sound so perfect right away, but later on in subsequent versions, the audio will be cleaned up. By cleaning, what they do is they eliminate noise. Background noise can be eliminated through careful manipulation of the audio track. So eventually you're going to have a nice clean audio track for the video, but alpha, no. You got the raw audio, you can hear what people are saying, their responses and that sort of thing, but it hasn't been cleaned up yet, again, for time reasons. Then you have a first review. And when you do the review, it's important that you identify who the reviewers are for your alpha version. You don't want to cast of thousands in reviewing, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to have just one person. You might want to have a few eyes on the video and looking at it and reviewing it. The review process can be very simple. As people are reviewing the video, and usually the video is hosted on Vimeo or YouTube, but it's a private video so no one else can see it. Usually the producer, or you can develop this yourself, you just have a Word document. And at each, whenever someone notices something or they have a comment about something, they pause the video, note the time index on the video, and they just put that into a Word document. Say at 1 minute and 3 seconds, I noticed da-da-da-da, and they put their comment in. There are other platforms though, and it depends on whether you're doing this yourself, whether you're hiring a video producer or a contractor, but there are platforms like Vimeo, which is another hosting platform for video, that has a review feature. So that system allows you to play a video, and then at any moment in the video, if you have a question or you want to make a comment, you just click anywhere on the video. The video will stop and a pop-up box comes up and you type your comment. That comment is then indexed to that time in the video, so that the videographer and the video editor later on can go back, review all the comments, and see exactly where in the video, while they're reviewing the video, that the comment was made. The second version of the video is called a beta version. This is a fully edited version. This has all the titling, all the media has been integrated, and everything is the way it should be in the video. Again, it may not have color correction or audio correction. That really depends on the video producer at that point in time and whether they want to do that. But it will have everything in it. The intro music, the B-roll, everything is there in the beta version. Then you do a second review on the beta version. I highly recommend, and this is from experience, you use the same people who reviewed the alpha to review the beta. The reason why is because they've seen the alpha already. They've made comments on the alpha. Now they're prepared to look at it in a different context with their comments and requests for changes already integrated into the video. If you bring in totally brand new people, they may be identifying things that as a group your alpha reviewers decided it's not a big deal, let's leave that one alone. But a new beta reviewer might actually say, well, I think we should change that. And you start getting into kind of going backwards in time, back to the alpha version again when you do that. So use the same reviewers from the alpha to the beta. The final version of the video is called the gold version. That's fully color corrected, audio is corrected, and any edits or changes that came out of the beta review have been integrated. At that point, you probably still want to do a review. You probably don't need all of your reviewers chiming in, but you probably want to take a look at the video, make sure that it is of the quality that you want, it has everything in it, that all the review comments that came from beta are integrated and made possible in that new final gold version. Technical requirements. Well, we talked about closed captioning and audio descriptions. We talked just a little bit about other languages. Some of these online services are also able to create captions in other languages for you. Rev.com is one of those companies. They do that, but many others do it. Here's where it gets a little bit complicated. If you need audio descriptions in another language, you would probably, if you needed audio spoken, you would need to have it recorded by someone in that using that language. So if you need Spanish for your video, you can get Spanish closed captions, which is great because you can you'll still hear it in English, but you'll see the captions in Spanish underneath while people are talking. But if you need audio descriptions, you have two options. You can have them recorded in Spanish, in which case you might want to have the whole video done in Spanish with overdubbing, which is very expensive and time consuming. Or you might have audio descriptions added to the captions themselves. So the way we've done this in the past is we have the captions coming across the screen. They're in Spanish, but then there's an audio description. So we have a bracket for the audio description and then close bracket, open bracket, close bracket. So people know that that's an audio description of something. If people are using a reader program, a program for reading text on screen, the caption file can be read back to them, and it would include the audio descriptions as well. Other considerations: where you're going to host your video. Most people will put it on YouTube, and that's probably a good place to put it. Vimeo is another option, but there are others. Most of them don't require a cost, some do. But you also want to consider, do you want advertising to appear next to your videos? YouTube, obviously, that's how they make their money. If you don't want advertising, you do have to pay for that. There are other options you want to consider. For instance, if it's part of a series of videos, you want to make sure that the series are bundled together in YouTube, for instance, so that people know that after video 1, the next video is video 2 and 3 and so forth, and they can see that on the sidebar while they're watching the video. And also video delivery options. So how do you want the video given to you? Do you want the video producer or the editor or your videographer to simply upload it for you? Do you want it on a DVD? How are they going to get it to you? It's important because most people only want the final version. But you might find that you want something else. You want it on a hard drive, and you want all the files that made up the video. I'll tell you, even for a 5 or 10 minute video, the number of files that get produced and the size of the files are enormous. Most of our projects require at least 1 terabyte hard drive, external hard drive, to store all the files related to a project. It's quite massive. So you might not want all of that, but if you're working with the video producer, they'll save all that stuff for you. Logos, graphics, and text, we've talked about this. Photos, any audio. You might want to pick some intro and outro music for your video, and that can be licensed or it can be produced for you. Licensing is easier, clearly. Any text titles, this is really also important. It's part of the blocking script, but you also want to get the names and titles of everyone who appears in the video, because if someone is a physician and they're appearing in the video, you want to make sure you have their name right, their title right, their affiliation. Everything you need to have that appears in text has to be very clear and correct, so it can be added. And I mentioned the review. But some things to think through regarding questions is, what is your general impression of the video? What sections are most effective? What footage could be cut? If you're striving for a 5-minute video and the video has come in at like 12 minutes, clearly there's a lot of cutting that's going to have to occur. And it's where that review process can really be helpful. Sometimes the footage doesn't work either. It's just not quite clicking, in which case you may want to that might be something to cut. You also want to make sure the content is accurate. Now, hopefully that gets caught when the video is being shot. So if you're interviewing someone and they say something that's inaccurate, you should stop at that point, cut. Let's do that again. Actually, the correct response would be X. It's more about accuracy and less about, right or wrong. It's more about, you got the URL wrong. It's .org, not .com, that kind of thing. And in the final review, you may want to include interviewees in the final review. In other words, the people who appear on the video might want to see what the final video looks like. Now, it's not that you're necessarily giving them a thumbs up or thumbs down, but you want to consider as a courtesy to make sure that they know when the video has been posted, for instance, and when it's available. I talked about project organization. We prefer to do everything on an external hard drive to store the project. External hard drives are very inexpensive, only about $100 or so, and it allows you to put everything that's related to the project on that drive. If you should ever need to go back to the videographer or the video editor and change something in the video, you've got all the assets that make the video up, as well as the final version of the video. I want to stop here for questions. Again, you can use the chat box to ask anything related to anything we've covered for this webinar. And perhaps, oh, great. I did a great job, thanks. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have any questions, that's fine. If you have questions later that occur to you, I believe you can contact Ruth or contact the MSKTC project, and we can try to answer those questions for you. One thing that you might want to put in the chat box, if you want to, is any issues you've had. So, several of you actually mentioned that you've done videos in the past. I'm wondering if you might share any issues or problems that might have come up. And you can raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted. We can unmute you if you'd rather say something audio-based. But if not, that's okay. You can just type it in the chat. All right, so one item that was just posted here is one issue is presenters or speakers not doing well. They're reading, looking down while the recording is on. Yeah, sometimes that can be a real issue. One thing that we do, if people actually do have to read bullets or they're reading a script, literally a script, is we try to use a teleprompter. Now, if you're working with a professional videographer, they may already have a teleprompting system that you could use, and you're all familiar with that. It's just simply the text scrolling at a certain pace in front of you, and you'll read, and the person then can read it. However, it doesn't appear like they're reading off camera, but rather they're looking right at the camera. We also have used iPads to do that. There actually are apps that you can get, not expensive at all, that allow you to do teleprompting. So you load a Word document in, you set the pace at which the text scrolls on the iPad, and it's large, and then we actually mount or hang the iPad just below or above the camera, one of the principal cameras, and then people feel more comfortable that way. So that's a cheap way to do a teleprompter. And this is from Violet. In addition to captioning, we had ASL interpreters in picture-in-picture, and that's actually another really excellent way to address accessibility of the video. So that can be done as a separate video and then done as a picture-in-picture later in the post-production process. So that's really an excellent suggestion. Other issues, ambient noise and lighting when recording. Yeah, it's a real problem. There's always background noise. We know this from being in web-based meetings or webinars, the dog barking and that sort of thing. That's always an issue. But when you're at a busy place like a conference and you're trying to do the recording, it can be an issue. We try to use noise canceling microphones and things like that on the cameras. And rather than use what's called a shotgun mic, which is a microphone that's mounted on the camera and points out from the camera, we tend to use little lapel microphones that are wireless or wired to the camera. And you snake the wire down someone's back or something like that and connect it up. That allows you to remove a lot of the background noise, because all it picks up is what's happening within a very small radius in front of them. So that's a good point as well. Lighting is also an issue. Lighting is an art form, I will tell you, and you want to have someone who knows how to light a scene properly so that you don't get the dropped chin. You don't get too much side lighting unless it's appropriate. You know, you want someone who really knows how to light a scene properly so that it looks color balanced, light balanced, and it shows the video and the subject to their best. Do we have any recommendations working with individuals who are blind or visually impaired? Something like a teleprompter. What you could use is a wireless earbud. I'm thinking the kind that you would use with like your iPhone or some other device. And you can have that put into their ear, and you could have someone talking to them through that earpiece, kind of like a teleprompter, or reading the script to them. So that's one way to do it. If anyone has any other ideas, we haven't had to ever do that, but right off the bat, I think that could work. Provide the script in electronic format ahead of time. Yeah, particularly to the narrator. You know, if you know the narrator, the narration is usually recorded later, but if you provide the script in electronic form ahead of time, one thing I really caution is to make sure that people don't read the script exactly back unless you've written it to be read as a narrated script. In other words, usually when we interview people, we will tell them ahead of time, but not too far ahead of time, what the interview questions will be and what we're going to ask them. But we ask them not to write narrative responses back, because what they do is they read it either looking down, or even if they're not looking down, it sounds very scripted, and you don't necessarily want that for your video. So you want to be careful and kind of have a little bit of a balance there. What we sometimes will allow interviewees to do is to bullet point things. So just come up with some bullets that they might want to use to respond. But you know, when we've done filming at a conference, people obviously don't have the script ahead of time. They don't know what's going to be asked, and so it's more spontaneous. And sometimes spontaneous is very good because it comes across as being a spontaneous reaction or response. Yeah, most teleprompters allow you to adjust the size of the text. For a person who's visually impaired, you can also adjust not just the size, but the contrast, the color, everything. So you can have a lot of control over teleprompting, particularly for someone who's visually impaired, who's on camera for you. Anyway, I'd like to move on. These are all really great points, issues that have come up, as well as some best practices. So thank you for participating. Just to recap, these are our main takeaways for today. You know, just so you know, and always keep in mind, all the stages are very important. None of them are more important over one or the other. So planning, the shoot itself, and also post-production are all equally important, as well as the video production, which we'll talk about in the next webinar. Planning is everything. If you don't have a good plan, it's going to show. It's going to show in the video. It's going to show in what you capture for video. You don't want to be stuck without a scene that was really important or an interview that was very important. So planning is the key to all of this. You want to keep your idea for the video tight and focused. You don't want the video to try to be too many things to too many people. If you do, it winds up being nothing to anyone, frankly. And so you want to make sure your idea is really strong, it's tight, you know who your audience is, and it's really tightly focused and honed in on them and what they need to know and what your message is about. Whether you hire them or whether it's someone on your staff, you want to have a producer and a director for your project. You want to have someone who's kind of the project manager, the producer. They're thinking conceptually of the video and how it's all going to work and what it's going to be like. But then you want to have someone who's actually the director, who's calling the shots, and they're not necessarily the same person. They can be they usually are two separate people, frankly, but the director is the one who is making the trains run on time, making sure that everything gets filmed that has to be filmed based on the shooting schedule and the blocking script. So important. Be clear also, if you're hiring a producer, and we're going to talk about this in great detail next time, be clear with the producer what your vision is. Like, what do you want to do? have examples. If you found other examples that are really great on YouTube or wherever, use those examples, give them to that person, because they can use that to kind of help shape how they approach the project for you. Also, do develop that blocking script and shooting schedule. It's part of the planning process, but you know, it's your lifeline when you actually are at that point where you're shooting. And also when the video editor is editing, they need that, and they won't be able to complete the video properly without it. And if you're not good at dealing with logistics, or you'd rather not, have someone else deal with all that fine minutia that is necessary, and that we covered in the earlier slides. It's a lot of work to coordinate logistics. It shouldn't all fall onto one person. So what we've been talking about today is a more sophisticated kind of video that requires more people and process and development. But I hope this has been useful, and if you are not doing videos of that magnitude in that scale, I hope you have some good takeaways from this webinar today and can actually incorporate them and use them in your video production. And with that, I'm going to move to Ruth to talk about the resources that are also available to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul, for all that really valuable information. And thank you to all our participants for the great questions and comments that you contributed to the conversation today. I did want to bring to everyone's attention that we do have the msktc.org website, where you will find the Model Systems Researcher's Guide to Video Production that Paul has referred to throughout the webinar today. If you go to Knowledge Translation at the top menu bar, it'll take you right to the toolkit, and then if you go to the Develop and Test Products, you will find it in that list of resources. Also, you'll find the videos that Paul showed today, as well as many, many more videos that are great models of what you could do in your own work. So if you could go to the next slide, Paul. I just want to remind everyone that we do have 2 more webinars coming up, one in April and one in May. And as Paul mentioned, the next one coming up is going to be an NPR-style interview with a video production contractor, a director and producer, very experienced, who will also provide a lot of great insight from the front lines of conducting this type of work. So that'll be a great conversation to join us for. And then the final video is going to be the technical aspects of shooting video, which will get into a lot of specifics about equipment and how to get the best shots and all the different things that you have to think about that Paul mentioned today. But we will also have another one of our colleagues on that webinar who will share his personal expertise and give you a lot of guidance on how you can do that. So thanks so much. I also want to ask you if you will take our evaluation. When this webinar is closed down, it will pop up for you and you can take it. It's just a couple minutes, but it'll be really valuable for us to get your feedback. So we appreciate you taking the evaluation, and we just want to thank you for spending your afternoon with us and hope that you will join us again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Paul.